Ayo, back at it again with another video. Thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate it. So, this is an interesting thought experiment. I talk a lot about politics on the channel. I also talk a lot about sports on the channel. So, let's combine the two and let's see the path for the Big 12 conference to get to the 270 vote threshold to maintain a majority and acquire and attain the White House and the presidency. So currently, the Big 12 is at 137 votes. Your big states of Texas at 40, Florida at 30, and Ohio at 17 are your big ones, followed by the rest of the schools. There's a lot of schools in Middle America, Four Corner schools, and a few schools, a little here, a little there. So let's add to the map. Let's expand the Big 12 to get to the 270 vote threshold. So the approach that I'm going to take is we're going to try and make the map a little bit more even out across the board. There's a lot of schools here and a few schools over here. So let's kind of make the transition and make the travel costs a little bit the same across the board. So let's start with a really big state in terms of votes. California, 54. Your 54 votes in California brings the Big 12 up to on 191 votes. Now, there's a lot of schools that you can choose from. The two most obvious ones are Cal and Stanford. Let's say the ACC disintegrates. Cal and Stanford, easiest options to choose from. But also, you can look at San Diego State. They're a solid basketball program, solid athletics program across the board. There was a talk about Gonzaga, possibility of Gonzaga. That's a possibility. Didn't pan out as of right now, but that is also something that you can add. That would bring Washington's 12 votes. That would bring you up to 203. All right, so that's kind of what I'm expanding out westwards. Now let's expand out to the east. I'm going to take Memphis. Recently, the Big 12 was approached by Memphis, $200 million over the course of, I think, 5 or 6 years to join the conference. The Big 12 has said no, so we're going to take Memphis because we're going to take 11 votes from Tennessee. That will get us up to 77 votes between California, Washington, and Tennessee, bring us up to 214. I'm also going to take, I'm going to take Louisville because in this scenario, we're kind of going off the assumption that the ACC falls apart. So you take Louisville, you pair them, Louisville and Cincinnati, pretty close in geographic terms, both pretty solid programs, basketball, football, and in other sports. We're going to take Tulane, very solid program, brings you Louisiana. You take Georgia Tech at 16 votes, brings you up to 246. Maybe you're able to pull a Duke, basketball blue blood. You bring Duke into the fold. Or you take Wake Forest and NC State. Maybe if UNC doesn't get into the SEC, maybe the UNC moves to the Big 12. Maybe. But their likely landing spot's probably the SEC. So maybe you take a Duke. A Duke, pretty solid basketball program, obviously. They're a blue blood. North Carolina is also a blue blood. So that gets you up to 262. So you need 8 more votes. Now you can take a Virginia Tech, but that's not the school that I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of Pitt. You pair Pitt and West Virginia, the backyard brawl, a Big 12 in-conference rivalry. That gets you 19 votes, and that gets you to 281. Now, I think you can obviously go further. You could obviously take a Virginia Tech, you can take a Syracuse, you can take a Boston College. If you go with all of that, that gets you to 333. Very, very solid. You take the 137 you already have, you add almost 200, 196. But that would obviously be over the 270 threshold. All right, so there's a lot of different possibilities. You can take some West Coast teams, Cal, Stanford, maybe Gonzaga for basketball status. Maybe you take a Tulane, a Memphis, a Louisville, a Pitt, and maybe some schools along the Atlantic coast, a Georgia Tech, a Duke. Very, very good program in terms of basketball. That would get you to 281. You could take a Virginia Tech, a Boston College, 305. That's already over the 270 threshold. So if the Big 12 ultimately expands, there's a lot of different possibilities for them to expand into very large states along the coast, like a California, a Pennsylvania, a New York, a North Carolina, Georgia, and just that alone would be 270. And then you could also expand into states like Tennessee for Memphis, or Louisiana for Tulane, or Massachusetts for Boston College, or maybe a Gonzaga. A lot of different possibilities. But that map would be 281. So there's a lot of different possibilities. You kind of have to go along the coasts, maybe pick up a California school or two, and then, in the event that the ACC collapses, you pick up schools from the ACC, and you become that third power conference, which would get you roughly around 281. If you get rid of Massachusetts, you take a Pitt, a Syracuse, a Georgia Tech, a Tobacco Road school, and maybe a California school. That gets you to 270. So with that, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Deuces.